Worst Things First podcast is where ordinary people have the type of conversations that reveal the extraordinary in all of us. Every walk of life has a downside. Now let's start at the bottom. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to W.T.F.P, Worst Things First podcast. Today's guest, founder and co-owner of Fenimore Bros Tree Service here in Des Moines, Iowa, Paxton Fenimore. Welcome, sir. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
The head nod that they can see.
You know, would you say, as a tree trimmer or someone who provides tree service, that your life is in danger on a daily basis?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I like that.
Why?
Keeps me on my toes, I guess. I don't know. It's a little less mundane than working at the post office and fearing getting bit by a dog. But I'm sure every job has its own life-threatening events, but tree work is like at the top of the list.
Okay.
It's a job where, you know, you're always learning, and I like that, you know, the unknown and delving into it.
Okay. That being said, worst things first here. Give me the rundown of the worst scenario you've ever had with a customer. Once you're there on the site.
Dropped a tree on a house. Really, really the worst feeling I've ever had in my gut. Had 1,000 trees I've dropped that went the right way, and I remember the one that went the wrong way more than any other, and it could have killed me. And it was a long time ago, and it almost needed to happen because I learned from it, you know, quite a bit.
I like how you focused on what it could have done to you. How upset were the clients?
The dude that I dropped it on his house was an Asian dude, and he was really cool. His dad didn't speak English. He spoke with body language, and you could kind of gather the illustration of what he was trying to say, and he was basically telling us that tree's going to go in the fucking house. He was from Cambodia. The guy that we were working for, his best friend or one of his good friends weeks prior had shot his girlfriend in the head, and then a neighbor that walked up to see if they were okay after they crashed a car. So they were definitely potentially a rowdy bunch, but we ended up sitting in the house and drinking Patron with the dude, and he ended up being really cool.
Before or after
we were
the tree
insured
falling?
After the tree fell on the house.
Okay.
They were really cool. I mean, we had insurance, so it covered it. I was punching myself in the head as hard as I could. It really sucked. I hated it. It was the worst feeling, one of the worst feelings I've ever had. I had gone up, taken a bunch of limbs off, so like the stubby limbs went through the roof. I got down, I looked at it, I said, fuck, we can drop it. I got halfway through the cut, and there was weak.
For the sake of our audience, when you say halfway through the cut, what's that mean?
You make a face cut. So I made my face cut.
What's a face cut, sir?
A face cut is the cut that I make to send it in the direction I want it to go in.
Okay.
So you cut a pie out of it, and then you come in from the back about 2 inches above that, and you start cutting. Well, when I got halfway through the cut, I started to feel the saw move freely, which let me know that there was no fiber in the wood and that it was decayed and rotten. So that compromised my hinge. Started slapping wedges in it. I couldn't fit my truck in there, so I went to jump in the truck, and I saw the shadow of the tree moving towards me in the house, and it hit the house. Had it not have hit the house, it would have crushed me. I was going to run to the truck in a state of panic, grab it, go through the fence, and
do what? What was the plan?
try to pull the tree with the truck.
Okay.
Usually, if you have the truck on it, it's providing a lot more pull. You know, a lot of times you can't get a truck in the backyard, so you have to use wedges. You can use a jack, or you just have to piece it out. And you know, a lot of times it saves a lot of time if you just drop it. But we cut that corner that day, and I won't do it again. Like, tried to make the long route the short route.
Yeah.
Pay the price.
I mean, would you say that cutting that corner was the catalyst for that happening, or was it inevitable sort of thing?
It was I'd gotten cocky because every tree that I dropped had gone the right way. And it was 11 years ago. And I hadn't made that mistake yet. So I needed to make that mistake to be able to learn to not make it again. So when everything goes right, continually your confidence builds and maybe, gives you a false sense of confidence. So at that juncture, I realized how much I really had yet to learn. Now, when you are making a back cut, you don't know what you're getting into until you get halfway through your cut. And you want to feel resistance from the wood. You don't want to feel like, oh, it's going through easy. That kind of dictates your control over the tree.
Okay.
So if that's rotten, you can imagine, these wedges aren't going to have as much of an effect. Now I don't have the fiber of the tree and the strength holding it up. Now it's going to go wherever it wants to go. It went this way because it was a locust. Locust trees suck.
Okay.
Every tree has its own fiber, so you learn that. Every tree has its own reaction to getting cut and how it responds to the blade. So every fiber kind of is different. It's really no different than office work.
You know what that made me think of though? Alex Honnold, you heard of that cat?
Who?
He just there was I believe it was an Oscar-winning documentary on Netflix, The Free Soloist, rock climber.
Right.
The first time I saw him was actually on a documentary called Valley Uprising, which is on Netflix, and it just talked about there in Oregon, Washington, that area. Heads climbing back in like the 70s and 80s, and they would go up there, smoke herb, pop acid, and some of the coolest motherfuckers out this joint would just go up in that joint, and there was a progression from
they take
climbing.
acid and then climb rocks.
Yeah, because sometimes they'd be inclement weather while they're up there, and so they'd have to hang out overnight. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so there was a progression from. And now, don't get me wrong, this is the badasses of the rock climbers.
Right.
Not to say that everybody did this, right? And so there was a progression from rock climbing.
These are the guys that Alex looked up to.
That he looked up to.
Now they look up to him.
The Stone Masters was the name of one of those heads, and
Right.
you hear that double entendre in it,
Right.
These were the heads that they took it seriously. It was almost like a religion to them, rock climbing and that sort of thing. And they progressed from climbing with equipment to climbing with equipment, but not certain types of ropes, to eventually what Alex is a specialist in, which is free soloing, which is, once you let go, you let go.
Yeah.
It's a done deal. Anyway.
See, the same thing that he likes about that is the same thing I like about tree work.
Yeah, I see that. Now, here's where I'm going with it, because you just brought up something that piqued my interest. So the first time I saw him was in Valley Uprising. He was the little kid that would go and watch them, and then ended up surpassing all of them in that field, right? Mm-hmm. And then I saw there's a YouTube clip out there that's all about him watching rock climbing scenes in movies and him commenting on them and how realistic or non-realistic they are.
Right.
And in one of those scenes, I remember him pointing out the type of rock and the types of crevices in certain mountains. And he talked about how sandstone erodes way easier than granite. Yep. So when he's dealing with the sandstone path, he's going to take that differently and approach it differently. So I was just going to ask you that. Is there a difference when you show up to a site or when you know what's up with a tree on how you have to cut it? How do you have to approach it? Can you talk to me about that a bit?
Just the same thing, just the variables. If somebody calls me and says, I've got a 100-foot tree, how much is it going to cost to take it down? Number one, it's probably not 100 foot. There's not a lot of 100-foot trees there. And you can't answer that question over the phone. It'd be like asking a house builder how much to build me a house. It's just so vague. There's just so many variables that go into.
What's a more common average tree size here?
A tall tree here is about, and I just know from the length of my rope, if I'm up, 80 feet and I've got 160 foot of rope and I get to the bottom, that's how I gauge it. But 80-foot tree is about as tall as you're going to see typically, but we do 40, 50-foot trees. But there's just a lot of things you gotta look at. Am I taking it down above a house? Can I drop it? Is there power lines? Power lines are the things that power is. You got to play safe around electricity. That's the one kind of monster that scares me the most, you know, because of the tendencies of electricity being unpredictable and frying my dick off. I got metal down there, and I worry about that.
Yeah. Have you ever knocked down power lines?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, I've played it safe around electricity. Not to say that it can't happen. I mean, I know a guy in Indianola that I told him I'd take this tree down for like a case of beer. It was going to be easy for me. He tried to take it down himself and knocked the power lines down, killed the electric for all the way up Iowa Street, and it cost him like $5,000. So it's not cheap to do it.
So he made it to the big leagues. You haven't quite just yet in terms of power lines.
Right.
And
he's raiding.
I hear you. I hear you. Hey, give me an idea. So you just said you did that for a case of beer. Your company, your organization, what's an idea of the scope of job you can deal with? What's the smallest thing you'll come out for that's worth your time? What's the
now we have the equipment to do bigger jobs. I mean, if it's like we've done jobs for Soil Tech, we do jobs for Casey's, we do apartment complexes, animal housing. You know, we'll do every tree on the property. So
what's the makeup of the crew look like? Is it 2 people?
Right now,
10 people?
Right now we've got a 4-man crew. We did have last summer. We had anywhere from a 5 to 7-man crew. I can call him my dad if I need to. I sub out a dude named the Dirty Henry. The Dirty Henry compared tree climbing to rock climbing, and it's really no comparison. Like tree climbing, you're more on a ladder, where rocks are like, man, I respect those rock climbers like a motherfucker. When I watch them, it's like, that's the big leagues of climbing right there.
To challenge that though, we kind of just discussed the comparison now, you know,
well,
because his whole thing when I'm watching his commentary on that,
we discussed a facet of the comparison,
right.
But as far as the fitness, the physical fitness that it takes to climb rocks, you can see a fat fuck climbing a tree. It happens. Yeah. I mean, I put on quite a bit of weight since I got a bucket truck, and that was my workout. But I'm growing tits now, getting a belly, and I kind of need to get back into climbing. But you're not going to see a fat fuck climbing a rock.
Okay,
you can see it with a tree. I've seen some big motherfuckers, the Dirty Henry. Fat motherfucker, but he's up there climbing trees. He's got spikes. He's got kind of training wheels to get up there, you know.
No, I hear you. I hear where you're coming from on that. So just to make sure we have a complete perspective on this, right now you're rocking a 4-man crew.
We got Chris Jones, we got Sam, we got a rapper, and we got a stand-up comedian. I've got good-natured dudes. We care about the well-being of our employees. We get along with them personally. We try not to hire meth heads that look in your garage and try to steal shit. You got to be careful who you hire. Finding good employees is like, it's been a process. There's a lot of sifting through shit workers to find,
just so you know,
that are worth a fuck.
Just so you know, this isn't like a temp service for you to be able to advertise and actually get people on your team or stuff like that. I just want to make that clear. So right now, currently you have a 4-man team. You've had up to 7, 8-man team. I want to get an idea of how many people of that crew climb trees. Is that something that everyone has as a skill? My
brother and I.
Is that a liability issue, or what's that all about?
Just I really want, if they're going to be in the tree, to have confidence that they've familiarized themselves with groundwork, and if I see that they're wielding of the chainsaw subpar, I don't want to send them up there and put them at risk. And I'm kind of a control freak in that manner, to be able to send them up with confidence that they're not going to get hurt is kind of, it's going to take some time. We had one guy that I saw potential in him becoming a climber, because he does actually climb rocks and whatnot. He goes to the gym, but he's working on Cadillacs now. But it's hard to find somebody that they get tree work. Tree work's a line of work where you can tell a lot about a human being right off the bat, about their work ethic, whether or not they'd make a good Marine, or if they'd leave the first week.
Did you grow up climbing trees?
Yeah. Okay. If I wanted Air Jordans, I had to do tree work to get them.
Okay. So was his passing on
Pops had a business. He didn't pass it down. I worked with him, and I just didn't get paid. So I just ended up going and doing my own thing. I had a kid on the way. I didn't graduate from high school, didn't go to college. I needed a way to make money. I knew I potentially could be good at this. Went and tried to get some, applications in. I couldn't get a job at Casey's. I was getting frustrated, and I just kind of had to really grind and start with nothing, like an $800 truck, chainsaw, a hand-me-down saddle, hand-me-down ropes. Mm-hmm. And I was doing $2,000 jobs for $500, and I got cards and adding to paper, and slowly but surely, I kind of just started doing my own thing. And then we got a storm that came in 2007, and there was a lot of work to do in Indianola. I called my brother. I said, "Dude, I need some help. I'm overwhelmed." And we just had to drag all the brush out to the curb, and he started seeing the checks coming in, like, "Okay, I'm in. Let's do this." It's like, "All right, I'll pay you like $15 an hour." It's like, no. If I do this, we're going to be part. Okay, you're right. So we partnered up, and man, it's been it's a lot of backbreaking to get to the point to where you can afford the equipment that kind of does the work for you. Now we got a dingo. We can get that into any backyard. It can lift 1,000 pounds. We can grind stumps. We got a wood chipper, makes things a lot easier. Dump truck, bucket truck.
How long you been at it?
12 years. Okay. And I love being my own boss. We had an opportunity to sell the company and get 401ks and run their company, for a concrete company. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it's kind of like being at the crossroads of the devil, and it sounded, a lot of things were alluring, just kind of the insurance and everything they were offering, but the luxury of being my own boss, I need it. I don't like.
What would you
answering people?
I mean, what's the worst thing about the gig?
Worst thing?
'Cause, I mean, the risk. It sounds like you're into that. So what's the worst thing about it?
The uncertainty that maybe things don't pan out, and when I'm older, I've got a broken back, and I don't have the 401k. I don't have the. I've got to pad the money right now. I've got to start tucking away the money. It's the ant and the grasshopper thing, and the grasshopper goes and spends his money frivolously in parties and shit, and the ant's got to tuck his money away because he knows you got to think about the future. And with tree work, like my dad right now, he's broke. He lives in a cabin in the woods. He runs it off a generator. He gets Social Security, but that isn't much. So a lot of jobs, when you work for a job, hopefully in the future they take care of you. This is all on me, and that's fine. I think, we always talk about aloneness, and this is a job where I'm alone, and if I fuck up, that's on me. Mm-hmm. So my dependence on self is tested, and I don't have anybody to blame at the end of the day if I'm broke when I'm 60 or 70. But me right now, I've got about 20 years of good physical condition where I just have to bust my ass and try to make sure that I'm comfortable when I'm older. And I may not fucking live to see 50, or even 43.
The one thing about those endeavors where you are consistently relying on yourself, and you're reminding yourself of your own self-reliance and of your own fortitude, I found there's a subtle fulfillment in that. And so I could see why someone would do that over and over and over and over again, whether or not it seems prudent in terms of future planning. The
idea of having a regular job and waking up on your time. Yeah. Well, I have to wake up on the time of my customers. We do. We get up early. It's going to be getting hot. We'll be getting up at 5:30 and getting at it at 6, getting done at 12 or noon before it gets too hot. But the idea of being somebody's bitch kind of daily, and I couldn't do it. Like getting that taste of being my own boss, like I couldn't go back to not. I've flipped burgers before. I've done hardwood flooring, and I kind of had to conform more. I had to flex and bend my personality. I don't have to do that with tree work. I don't put on a different face for them. You know, I cuss, I have a beer with them at the end. They either like me or they don't. You know, I don't have to bend. I can kind of choose who I want to work for. I can tell them the first 3 or 4 seconds on the phone if you and I are going to get along.
Yeah.
And if I can tell our auras aren't going to mix, I either won't even go look at it, or if I get there and I can tell you, well, what time are you going to be here? Or are you guys going to fuck up the hostas? Little shit.
Yeah.
Some people are like, they understand. You're taking down a tree. There's going to be some scuffs in the yard.
Yeah.
And you just kind of can sense that.
I mean, the Asian cat had shots with you afterward, you know. So,
he was a good dude. I'm going to work for him again. He actually called me a month ago, and he was a good cat. And you could drop a tree on some guy's house, and he might fucking shoot you because he doesn't recognize human error.
But it's crazy, isn't it? How the fallout from error can vary and be quite great.
Right.
But it's dope when someone has the ability to recognize, but an error is but an error. Right. It is but a moment's fill of incorrect choice.
Right.
So that's crazy that cat could recognize that and actually even hire you again. That's actually dope to hear.
We were cool with
I don't know
him
if you're
the
gonna
whole
fuck his next house up, but it's dope to hear.
You know, it's not out. You know, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It is a line of work where you can make mistakes, and we try not to. Every now and then we'll go 2 months without making a single one, and then go a whole week where every day is just frustrating, you know. Mistakes are a thing to me, like they need to happen, and how you take those mistakes and the accountability of the mistake and recognizing where you went wrong. A lot of people will make a mistake and not be accountable. They'll look around for, I didn't do it, somebody else did it, it wasn't me. Yeah. And they look around for a scapegoat immediately. You've gotta know where you went wrong and kind of troubleshoot and work on it, you know.
So in 12 years, there's never been a prodigy that you've come across. You almost had one cat, but there's never been a prodigy that you've come across where you're like, that cat's gonna take.
The thing is, when you run into that prodigy, you're just kind of training your own competition, you know.
I was gonna ask.
Eventually, it's like, you don't need me. You can do everything that I'm doing just as well or even better. Then you'll go do your own thing. You gotta find somebody that. The number one thing is the guys we got right now. They're ready to come to work every day, and they appreciate that we're flexible, and we're friends with them. Yeah. Sam wants to go and do a comedy tour, dude. Go do your thing. You know. We're rooting for you. And he knows that. So he can go leave a week. He's broke, you know, when he gets back. And, you know, I try to help him out, buy him lunch if you know, it comes to that. But, and Chris, same thing. Chris wants to bounce up to Minneapolis. He knows he's always got a spot.
It's all good. You don't have to tell everybody's business. But here's one thing I was going to say, because I get that, where you're coming from. One of the best managers I ever had, when I became a manager at one point, put me on the game. And at the point at which I became at the point at which I became a manager, I had this idealistic approach of everybody that's under me and it's on my squad is going to perform at the level I perform at. Right. That's the standard I'm going to set. That's what we'll be known for.
You got to set the pace.
And one of the best lessons, or at least one of the most accurate lessons I could say I ever learned from a manager, is when she broke down that actually you need the variance. You need your superstars, but you can only have so many superstars on a team, because if you have too many superstars, they're just going to go and do their own thing. Yep. You need a couple of superstars, and you need some sort of available incentive or room for them to grow or something like that. Right. Then below that, you need some above average people who can look up to the superstars and aspire to be that and grow into that when you need them to be. Below that, you need the people who just come to work, show up every day. They're going to do everything you need them to do.
That's the main thing.
Nothing extra.
Yep.
And then as you start to get lower than that, you may begin to have to trim the fat. You may start to get people who cheat the company and such.
And you can tell if they have actual genuine interest to see the company grow, or if they're just there to get a paycheck. Like I said, motherfucking tree work is really no different than office work.
Yeah.
The only difference is you guys have fax machines and staplers. We have chainsaws and carabiners. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of the same things that play into it, you know, and it's all showing up for work, actually being productive. I like going to work. Like I actually need that to clear my head. You know, I had a couple of bad years, you know, a couple of years ago that we spoke of, and that was kind of part of my my therapy. You know, getting up, going to work, and climbing fucking trees and shit.
Yeah.
Though at times you need your focus, and if things outside of work bleed into work and take away your focus, that can also hinder your abilities, you know, on the job.
How interconnected are the tree service companies in town? And what I mean by that is, do most of you know each other because you find yourself in bidding wars or you're stepping on each other's toes? Do you not really know of anybody until you
We
just
all
have-
flip each other off when we drive by. It's kind of like, you know,
Okay,
we
like
drive
some
by another
Volkswagen
tree.
Beetle sort of
No.
fan club type shit.
Like, no, they're cool. There's some good dudes. The guy that sold me my bucket truck, Andy, like, great dude. Oxfords, I know a lot of them.
Any black tree companies?
There's a couple dudes that are black that climb, but I don't know that they own the company.
Have you noticed?
None with dreadlocks.
Have you noticed a difference in the tree climbing ability between black servicemen and white servicemen?
From the Achilles
Yeah.
gentleman.
Okay. You said you already had a stand-up comedian on your team?
Right.
Okay. I just want to let him do that.
Right.
Do you yourself have any black employees?
We had T-Dog working for us for a minute, and he knocked out Dave Solomon.
Somebody. Okay, so you had one at one point. He knocked somebody out.
We had AJ. We had Joel. Joel worked for a while, and that was tough on his ankles. AJ Rice, he worked for a bit. Big dude. He's a bouncer. And then we had T-Dog here and there, you know. T-Dog ended up beating up Dave Solomon. But Dirty Henry, he may have a little black in him.
Yeah.
But he kind of does his own thing. And if I ever called him and said, "Hey, dude, we got a big job," he'd come and help.
Okay. So like roughly 20 to 25% of the black climbers you've hired have assaulted somebody on site.
Yes.
I want to ask you real quick. Most craftsmen, they tend to have like a trusty something that goes along with them on every mission.
Right.
You know, what is yours? What is it? What does it do? Explain that piece of equipment to us. Is it a belt? Is it a saw? Or what? You know,
Snap buckle. We definitely, we carry a lot of snap buckles.
What's for our audience? What's a snap buckle?
Just kind of a carabiner deal. We wear them as accessories. You can clip them to your hat. We have ropes, chainsaws come into play.
Yeah.
We use a porter wrap. A porter wrap you wrap around the base of a tree, and you can lower limbs and have more control of the limb that you're letting down.
Because you're already pulling on it, so pressure's being applied from
every now and then you'll look in the back of the truck and see a ladder. Every now and then a ladder will come in handy. We name all of our things. Our bucket truck is Gary. Mm-hmm. Our dump truck is Dumpy. Our chipper is Chippy. We crashed Ralph. That was a white truck, but everything's named. So we say, go get the inspector. That's a pull saw. So it takes like time for a new employee to kind of acclimate to know when we say, go get the inspector, then we have to kind of familiarize them with our titles for all of our equipment.
Okay. It didn't seem like there were.
Do you want to get to this moose or not?
Yeah, let's do that. I did take note. It didn't seem like there were any African American names for the equipment, but you did ask me an interesting question before we went on air here, and
we do have a snap buckle named Tyrone.
You got one black friend, huh? For the listening audience, I have known Paxton here for several years. I'd say in close speaking terms, what are we looking at? Maybe 6?
Early or late 2015
Okay.
when we started making albums.
Yeah, 4 to 6. But knew of him prior to that.
Met me when I was beating up a fucking telephone booth, which I don't remember.
That definitely happened. And so in another episode, we'll talk more about some of those other exploits and how we came to be and where our relationship is going from there. But prior to going on air just now, I was asked by Mr. Fenimore here if I'd be comfortable with housing a moose in my backyard for just a couple of weeks. It sounded like. Can you explain?
Late June. Got a customer named Rusty.
Okay.
Rusty Good. And
so to be clear, Fenimore Brothers Tree Service has a customer.
Yeah.
And the customer proposed to you.
Well, we were doing some tree work.
Did you take a moose, a live moose?
He just asked me if I knew anywhere he could put the moose for a couple of weeks. So he and his wife are getting a divorce. She wants the moose out of there.
Okay.
Moose's name is Hamilton. In the moving process, he needs a place to put the moose. So I said, I'll ask around. I actually have a friend that doesn't like to mow his lawn, so maybe the moose can go back into his yard, stay there a couple of weeks, fucking mow the grass for him. And I told him I'd ask it. I said he'd probably be cool with it, but I don't know if his wife Kim would. So got to wait to hear from her. Maybe you discuss it with her and see if that's a possibility.
Man. You know, as I said, I gotta keep the low profile with the neighbors.
Right.
I'm also not very versed in wildlife maintenance.
He's a good moose. Like he's actually.
I wouldn't doubt
chill.
it, but we haven't met. And sometimes when you haven't met another individual, the temperament is unpredictable.
Right.
For all I know, he had a bad experience with somebody that looks like me.
You got a decent backyard?
Nope.
For the live audience, our producer Mike, who is off camera at the moment, is who was just questioned. So is that the entirety of the whole moose ordeal? I've declined. So is there nothing else to say?
I'll probably have to go ask T-Dog now. He's got an enclosed back.
Do you expect to actually take this moose off of this customer's hands?
I'm just trying to help him. That's what I do.
What happens if you don't? You still get the job?
You know, Animal Rescue League maybe. I don't know. I'm just looking to be a vessel.
What I will ask of you is that you report back to us and give us an idea of what went down with the moose. I would like to follow up on that.
Hey man, there could be a day where you look in your backyard and there stands a moose.
There could be. It won't be, while I'm living. But I do imagine
I'll tell him to take his shoes off at the backyard.
It can happen at some point. Do you even know how to maintain a moose? That's where I'm coming from on this whole thing.
Let them eat some grass. Take a bucket of water back there. I think they're pretty self-sufficient animals.
Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit. Been looking at a few current events here, and on April 29th, there was this article, Rutherford.org. It's written by John Whitehead. He's a constitutional attorney. He's also the founder and president of the Rutherford Institute.
I like that pimple.
Yeah. That article includes quotes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And it's basically just talking about the uptick in human trafficking, that sort of thing. It references that children are being targeted, sold for sex in America every day. The average age for a young woman being sold is about 13 years.
We are
really
really switching fucking gears here. We went
and
from
in that article
to child trafficking.
But here's the thing. In that article, investigative journalist Amy Fine Collins is quoted as stating that it's become more lucrative and much safer to sell teens than it is to sell drugs or guns.
Right.
Yep. So they're talking along the lines of how like a kilo of heroin can be retailed once, but a young girl can be sold 10 to 15 times in a day, and a righteous pimp would confiscate 100% of those earnings. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. According to USA Today, 2.5 million purchases are made a year. And we're talking about human trafficking. Now, we know here being in Iowa, here in the Midwest, this is a hotbed for human trafficking as well. Yeah, it is actually. There was a huge buzz actually relatively recently here in the state. And I've been hearing it for a while that it's been going down heavy. My question to you is, what are your thoughts on, number one, why this is so prevalent and particularly involving men of high societal stature, be it politicians, be it doctors, lawyers, what have you?
I don't know. True Detective, I think, tried to touch on it. I don't know. Fucking power trip, I guess. It's a sad thing. About those snap buckles.
Oh, back to the snap buckles?
Yeah. I mean,
let's do that.
Nah, I'm just kidding.
You know what? Here's my thought on this, though, because I've actually been saying this for a long time, and I saw this article today, and it's what made me bring it up. This is well, if you look into pedophilia and pederasty, you're talking about something that's it's been going on for centuries, you know. And one thing that I think that we failed to consider over time is there could actually be an orientation where adults are simply attracted to children. And I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying that it should be excused or anything like that. But in this day and age, more and more, we're opening the mindset of understanding that gender isn't as simple as male, female, that we may not have accounted for a bit more complexity, both inside of the body and the mind and all that sort of thing. And the one thing I always think about is, you know, I watch a ton of documentaries, crime documentaries, all that sort of thing. And you see people who've been locked up 20 years, 30 years for pedophile acts. They get out and they cannot help themselves to go and do the same thing again. So the punishment isn't necessarily a deterrent. I lived.
Well, the punishment isn't harsh enough. I just saw a cop got.
Is there such a thing
for child porn, and a guy that was selling weed got longer than that.
Yeah, but no. Okay, so the disparity in sentences.
Is there a harsh enough punishment?
Yeah.
Louis C.K. touched on it. Like, obviously not. Like, the urge is too uncontrollable.
Well, check this out. Check this out.
The
The disparity in the sentences that are given out is a whole other topic, and I certainly want to have you back on. I want to discuss that at one point, because that is a huge thing. In fact, Cosby's sitting in jail right now. Harvey Weinstein is facing a $44 million suit where he can just pay out of it. He could pay his way out of over 80 accusations against him. Right. Last year, he actually proposed
we
that.
really switched fucking gears.
Last year, well, this is worst things first.
Right.
Last year, his legal team proposed a settlement to the victims of $90 million. So in a year's time, not only has he gotten a potential outcome for him that is less severe than him being incarcerated like Cosby was, but it's also less than half of what his legal team proposed to the victims just a year ago, right? But this whole thing, I remember I lived on 31st Street. And when I lived over there, I remember coming outside and I noticed that there was a neighbor on one side of the yard that whenever the small little girls on the other side of my fence were out, he would just come and just be leaning against the fence, gazing at them. And it just felt really weird and off to me at one point of like how he would leave when they left, but when they were back out, he was back there and he was just staring and gazing at them and doing that sort of thing, right? And at one point, my intuition just told me, dude, this isn't what's up. But I also knew
what stopped you from confronting him.
Well, I did confront him, and I'm getting to that, but I didn't confront him physically as I might have done some years ago, because we're all maturing. You can't settle everything with violence and that sort of thing. And plus, I don't know what this cat's doing.
Right.
And so I decided to just add a stimulation into the experiment, so we can see how a person reacts, and I can see what's up. I can learn what you're really doing. And I remember going and I pulled out my phone and I began to record him. And I remember him looking at me, and it was almost as if he couldn't tear his gaze from the girls, because he only looked at me for a moment before he just went back and stared at the girls again. Yeah. Huh. And by this time, I'm maybe 6 to 8 feet away from the person, right?
How old is the dude?
He probably was in his 30s to 40s, upper 30s to 40s, white glasses, tall, skinny, white dude.
And how old are the girls?
Oh, they were Oh man, they were below 8 years old. Little like skirts, wearing the stuff girls wear, skirts, barrettes, and that sort of thing. And he kept doing it. Like it would happen like more often and more often. And so that one day I decided to go out and put the cam to him. And I noticed that he looked at me for a second, but it was like his gaze couldn't be pulled away from the girls. So that it only lasted for a minute that he looked at me recording him. And then he turned back to the girls, and the smile started to curl back up on his face again. And it was almost like his eyes glazed over. And then he did it again. And now I'm moving closer and closer. And then finally at one point he said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just recording you. What are you doing? And he's like, I'm just looking. And I was like, just looking at what? And he just gestured to the ladies like, just looking. And again, this is just a feeling. And so the reason I bring that up is because—
You have this footage?
I don't, but hold on, here's where I'm going with this. The reason I bring this up is because I just had a feeling and an intuition that something was up and that this wasn't right? So I couldn't do it much more than that. You know what I'm saying? I just wanted to make him uncomfortable enough so that he would stop. You know what I mean? And at one point he ended up saying, I don't feel comfortable with you. He said, I don't feel comfortable with you recording me. And I said, yeah, but I don't feel comfortable with you making sure that every time these little girls come out, you come out and you're staring at them. And when they leave, you leave, and you're doing it over and over and over again. And real quick, just let me clarify. Now it's all flooding back to me. This was a hot summer day. They had a little kiddie pool out there. So the girls were in a bikini, like not bikinis, but little girl swimsuits, but they were at that age where you wear jellies and barrettes and skirts and that sort of thing. Come to find out, I ended up talking to a neighbor a day or two later, and they told me, oh yeah, that dude's a registered sex offender. They almost got into it with the cat like a summer or two ago because he has that rap. You know what I mean? And the reason I bring that up is because the one thing I noticed about that interaction is when I first brought the camera out and he saw the camera in my hand, it wasn't that he instantly thought about, what does this mean? What kind of trouble am I going to get in or whatever? If he thought about that for a second, I noticed how his face pulled back. It could not help but to pull back to the little girls, right? It seemed super impulsive. And so I take that little piece of information and I think about, why would someone be locked up for 20 years, 25 years for sexually abusing a little girl, torturing somebody, and then they get out and the first thing they do is cross that same line again? Like, what it suggested to me is, dude, this is a deep rooted inside thing. Like that is what they are attracted to. That is their natural need. Now, it's not to say it's right. It's not to say we should defend it or anything like that, but I think we're coming into an age where we are beginning to understand there is more sexual orientation forms than we previously thought. We tried to come up with a binary box, male, female. Male should be attracted to female. Female should be attracted to male. That's how we came out with. More and more now with the progressive LGBTQ community, I think we're beginning to understand there's more complex things than that. They're even talking about now that the neurology in people's brains, that when they map them, they are seeing that some people, not all, but some people who are transgendered, it actually seems to reflect what they identify with. What I think we always overlook is the fact that, dude, there could be people who are actually outright orientated in such a way that they are attracted to children to such an extent that they will brave that and go for that and seek that, even at the risk of punishment,
clearly, whatever,
all types of shit, right?
Yeah.
You talk about, the punishment isn't harsh enough, but dude, what is, I've seen several interviews from death row people who are actually on death row who say, dude, normally when you kill someone in that moment, there's a few reasons you might kill them, One, you may just be temporarily, literally out of your mind from passion or from whatever, But in another instance, you may just be all out ready to kill. And when you're ready to kill, your thought process is not, I'm going to be put to death for this. Your thought process is, I'm coming to kill. I'm going to do what I'm here to do. Right. So my point is, the death penalty is hardly a deterrent to people killing. We know that. So if the death penalty isn't a deterrent to people killing, what punishment would we deem hard enough for some other stuff, especially if there's a potential for it to be a natural inclination. It's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, it's
kind of fucked up because I don't mean to sound as if I'm defending child molesters. I just think the issue is more complex than we'd like to think.
Right. I hear you.
You know,
I've always noticed because it's a mental illness, and a lot of people that lash out at gays and shit end up being the same people that are closet homosexuals. I often think that the same thing applies to people that lash out at pedophilia, and you gotta blow his balls off, or whatever. It's like there's actually a confliction there too, because it would be the worst confliction you could possibly fucking have.
There could be, certain cultures and things, prison life and things like that. It could just be the code too. I'm sure for the majority of us, there was a point of our time coming up where we were just like, ride or die. Anybody that touches kids, that's done deal. That's on sight. The green light. That's just how you can be bred to feel that way. But I do hear what you're saying from the standpoint of outside of those certain.
There's a happy medium to be at between the empathy of it and the persecution of it. There should be persecution. There should be anger. But there's also like overly the fact that you're thinking in depth of it is a start. Not a lot of people are going to. Clearly, it's an epidemic to where you can't even. We had a worker, Dave, that went up to some kids in the woods and offered them candy. So my brother had to have the uncomfortable conversation with the lady that was the owner of the daycare center that got a call from the parents that didn't like, a guy handing the kid candy.
Yeah.
Now in today's climate, you just know you can't walk up and hand a fucking kid candy. Now, if you were doing it innocently, it's too bad that you fucking can't, but you just know you can't go hand a kid candy.
Yeah.
Now, in Dave's mind, Dave's kind of the dude that he knocked out is kind of a retarded motherfucker. Mm-hmm. He doesn't understand that. Now, it could be from a point of innocence, but who knows? But Spencer had to stand there and like kind of say, "I'm sorry. This is a uncomfortable conversation for us to be having," but. He didn't understand that was just a fucking no-no. And it's just too bad that it is. But everybody kind of understands at this point that that's the climate of things.
Yeah. I take your point. And I guess regardless of climate, that when I was coming up, while it may not have been the Me Too climate that we're in currently, that was something that my mother drilled into our heads as well. Always, hey, you let me know if somebody tries to touch you and says, don't say this or don't say that. She was big on that. Right. So to your point, I do think there are enough indicators and clues out there that someone should know better than to do such a thing. And if they don't, they need that talk. The reason all this kind of came up for me is that, here within the last few days, Alabama, which is a state I actually used to live in as a kid, it's where I learned to fight, actually. And Alabama recently just passed a bill that requires chemical castration for certain child molesters.
Right.
And I wondered about your thoughts and our listeners' thoughts on how appropriate that.
I really don't think it's a bad idea. It's an urge they can't fight, and castration is probably a good fucking start. It's
a touchy thing, no pun intended. Because I think about it, and when I think back to that dude who couldn't help himself but to reconnect his gaze, even though he knew I was approaching him with a camera and recording him and all that.
Could your assessment have possibly been off? What if it was just his nieces and he was just fucking watching?
Oh, I know it wasn't. I know. I
He
know
was on the section.
He was on. Not only was he on the registry, but he was on one side of the. I was the middle yard between him and the other neighbors, and so he was looking across my backyard, over his fence, over his chain link fence, through the other chain link fence to the girls frolicking and all that sort of thing in the kiddie pool in their little swimsuits. Yeah. And again, he made a point of when they went in, he was done being outside. When they came back out, he's outside. Yeah. So that was a thing. And to the point of your question, yeah, there's room that I could have been wrong. Absolutely. And I try to consider that, which is why what I didn't do is get physical. You know, what I didn't do is make an accusation. But when I asked the neighbors who actually lived over there, like, hey, do you know this cat? They ended up telling us, yeah, dude, he's on this. You can look it up. Yada yada yada. We actually got into it with him for a few months back because he was doing this or the same sort of thing. But my point of going there is when I think about all of that, and I think about so clearly some people can't help themselves. I'm not excusing them, but I'm saying some people can't help. They are that inclined to program that they can't help themselves. What does castration actually do? I understand that the one thing it would prevent is the penetration experience for someone.
You kind of just have to lock them up because nothing's more delicate than the innocence of children and anybody that can't defend themselves. So, if at what point are you allowing too much leeway because of I don't know, trying to empathize, trying to fucking, we run into it with trees. People wanna save trees at the expense of somebody possibly dying. So it's like, at what point do you got to make a choice? Either you protect human life or you protect the fucking tree. It's the same thing with a child's innocence or the fucking pedophile. Yeah. How much length do you want to go into trying to understand their mindset?
Oh, that makes sense. It makes sense. I guess the only thing that would give me pause there is human error. Right now we treat DNA evidence as if it's conclusive evidence. But then there's all these reports out about how DNA evidence actually isn't as accurate as
there will be a day where you can probably take a fucking blood sample and just know if the goddamn wiring's there or not. I mean,
perhaps, but my point is, if we're to move down this path, where does that end? And once you've done it, is it done? Once you've removed someone's ability to have a fruitful, reproductive life, and then you find out later, he wasn't the guy, accident. Sorry. What has happened here? But look, man, I'm looking forward to having you back on. I know we're close to getting out of time here. Yeah. And no, we've definitely gotten to the type of conversation that I'm looking to hear from you, man. Hear opinions and good discourse here. Where can people find out more about Fenimore Brothers Tree Service? How should they look you up if they need that sort of?
You just Google it, like anything.
Okay, so you don't really give a fuck about no new business. I see that. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is W.T.F.P. Worst Things First podcast with your host Fatal Rock, Paxton Fenimore of Fenimore Brothers Tree Service. Peace. We out. Much love for rocking with this episode of W.T.F.P. If you enjoyed what you heard today and want to hear more honest discourse with interesting people from ordinary walks of life, please like and share this clip. Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Every walk of life has a downside, and we begin the conversation there. This is Worst Things First, the podcast.